the Neighbors Podcast. We are so glad that you're here. Can't wait to get into our conversation today. But before we do that, a couple of announcements and invitations, if you will. The first is we are launching a new merch line. We were selling it at our Neighbors Community Night back in December, and we haven't yet put it on the website. But it is officially launching Friday. So today's Wednesday. So mark your calendars. If you listen to this the day that it comes out, then in 2 days, we are going to launch our merch. And there's some really fun stuff. So I hope you go on there, grab a t-shirt for you, grab a t-shirt for a friend, whatever it is, get out there and be wearing it and tell people about Jesus. And so I hope you get your merch whenever that comes out. And then the second thing I want to invite you to, this for the women of the Neighbors Podcast, which I know we have a good amount of men too. And I would love to say I'm so glad that you're here, men. And I can't tell you what it means to me when I run into someone somewhere and a man specifically, and he tells me that he's enjoying the Neighbors Podcast, because it's not just a podcast for women and it's not about women. This is a podcast for everybody. So, but this invitation is specifically for women. Now, men, if you have women in your life, wives, moms, daughters, then pass this invitation along to them. But on March 28th and 29th, we are having the Women's Encounter at the Church of 1122. And I want to invite you to be there. And you can buy a ticket on 1122's website. And it's going to be a time to gather together in worship and prayer. And Caitlin, who is a beloved Neighbors guest, she's going to be teaching Friday night. I'm going to teach the Saturday morning session. And then Lisa Turkers is going to be teaching Saturday night session. And then there's going to be breakouts, and Rebecca Maxwell, who's also a Neighbors favorite, she's going to be teaching one of those breakouts. And Meredith Andrews is coming, and she's going to be teaching one of the breakouts and leading worship. And I think she's going to be coming on the Neighbors Podcast. So excited for it. The tickets are $129. That covers all your meals and all that. So would love for you to come and join us. It's just going to be a really fun girl weekend. So come and do that. All right, today's guest. It's a good one, you guys. This is one of the most interesting people that I know. His name is Walker Day, and he has such a powerful testimony of God rescuing him out of darkness, and he tells his full testimony and how God called him to then be a pastor. So currently he is one of the pastors at the Church of 1122. He used to lead our whole care ministry. He really built our care ministry, how we love and care for people. And his handprint is all over our church, and the way that he talks about his relationship with the Lord and his relationship with people is so authentic and genuine, and he just can't be anything but himself. And every time I talk to him, I am encouraged to be bolder in my faith, to be more faith-filled, and to step into messy, gross places, because that's where Jesus would have gone. So I think you're really going to like our conversation. So here it is. But before we get there, we have some ads from our corporate sponsors that this episode is brought to you by Grounds of Grace. The next time you're looking for a great cup of coffee with a great local cause attached to it, make sure to check out Grounds of Grace Coffee Company here in Jacksonville. Grounds of Grace Coffee Company is the for-profit, they're nonprofit, sponsored by Grace, which has been serving in the Jacksonville murder capital 32209 for the past 6 years, fighting for the gospel to be delivered into some of the hardest communities in our city. Grounds of Grace is widely known for their popular lattes, shaken espressos, fun seasonal drinks, and their iced plant-based refreshers. Check them out on Instagram at Grounds of Grace Jax, Jax, or at one of their 5 locations in Jacksonville. This episode is also sponsored by Lay Construction. Lay Construction is a full-service general contractor specializing in commercial interiors. Whether your project is office, retail, hospitality, faith-based, or industrial, Lay Construction services all market types. The company is Jacksonville-based and dedicated to serving Northeast Florida by delivering the highest quality work in the industry. For any of your construction needs, Lay Construction is your team. Check out some of their completed projects on Instagram at lay_construction, and that's lay, LAY_construction, or online at lay-construction.com. And here's my conversation with Walker Day. Walker Day, welcome to the Neighbors Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Allie.
I'm so glad that you're here, and laughing because when I sent you the address to our studio, you said you've already been here because you were a leg model.
Yes, I've done a little leg modeling.
For some loafers. Let's be clear what the leg modeling was for.
Yeah, I'm one of the up-and-coming loafer models in the industry.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, a friend of mine owns a company, but I've actually always had a dream of, not necessarily making it in Hollywood or anything like that, but more like a retirement village billboard type of situation.
I could totally see you on a retirement village
running down the
billboard.
beach, something like that. Belks.
In the loafers.
Somewhere
the
in that
loafers
region.
is the gateway to that.
That's what I'm hoping. So, yeah, it was
wow,
fun.
that's amazing. We're going to get into your story and all that today, but I love to ask most guests, and especially you, because you are actually famous for your hot takes.
Oh, wow, yes.
And we were discussing before we recorded, you have to flip through a Rolodex in your mind because you have so many. Some might actually offend people. We're not really trying to do that here.
Yeah.
But what would you say is a hot take? Let me remind everybody what a hot take is. It's something you feel strongly about that would be incredibly unpopular opinion.
Wow. Incredibly unpopular. I would say that I guess that I believe that all of the I guess social and political unrest is a spiritual battle.
Okay, that's too serious.
Okay, well, I mean,
but yes, I agree.
I can blast half your audience out of here with a couple of them, and I might lose my job. So
yeah, okay, well, we don't want that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, tell us more. Tell us more about that.
Well, I just think that we can certainly start to believe that that there's a separation between the spiritual. I know in the church, there's there's just a lot of people would say, don't get into politics, don't talk about politics, etc. And, as Pastor Joby says all the time, in the Hebrew language and life and in Jesus' life, there was no separation between spiritual and day-to-day life. It was just everything is spiritual. And so that's how I've always seen it. And I get pegged as political sometimes because some of it does overlap, obviously, now. And I won't mention any particular topics. But, so I think just as a general, that would be probably where I catch the most flack because people somehow want to categorize things as political when I think they're all spiritual.
I actually do want to get into some specific topics.
Oh, Lord, man.
I mean, because you're right. There are definitely things, and we talk about this at our church specifically, but I know that there are churches who don't always talk about it. But there are things that happen in the political or economical world that they're trying to step in the lane of the church.
Sure.
So what are some of those specific topics?
I mean, an easy one would be abortion.
Yeah.
One that honestly, we get into my story a little bit later more, but it wasn't something that I always felt super strongly about, honestly. And when I surrendered my life to Christ and Holy Spirit started working on me, it became very apparent that it was evil and that it was not God's intention for babies to be murdered in the womb. So, I think that one, like just yesterday, seeing some of these people get let out of prison for praying outside of an abortion clinic. So, I mean,
and these like secret juries that they had.
Exactly.
I mean, the whole thing is
dark.
Pretty crazy. It's very dark.
It's dark.
And it's what you said, like at face value, you could say, oh, that's a really corrupt angle of government. But then if you take it one level deeper, you're like, no, that was the enemy gaining ground.
Exactly.
And in a really, that is like a really dark thing. Yeah. It's so crazy.
So I think that's an easy one. I mean, I think that, there's a lot of other stuff that has to do, there's aspects of almost every high level, big topic in politics right now that I would say has a spiritual root.
No doubt.
And if you look at the biblical values and just God's character, you can see that when you try to come up with solutions to social problems in a godless vacuum, you're gonna hurt the people that you're actually trying to help. I don't think a lot of the people that advocate for some of these policies want to hurt people. I think they genuinely want to help. But I think when you remove God from your process of how to put together a solution, you come up with policies or solutions that actually end up hurting the people.
Yeah, wow, that's so good. So what do we do about that? Like, what is the average believer listening to this podcast on their way to work, to their 9-to-5 job? Like, what's their role in that battle?
Obviously, being in tune with Holy Spirit, spending time in prayer and looking at God's word to know who he is and how he actually wants things to be done. But then beyond that, I think it has to do a lot with fear. I think our culture wants to label people with certain labels that are almost can get you excommunicated from society, canceled, whatever. And you have to be willing to say things that are somewhat unpopular or can be put in that category, even though it's not true, in order to kind of stand up against some of this stuff. So
that's a muscle I feel like I've been trying to flex, especially having a podcast where you're talking publicly about things that you believe. I historically am a big people pleaser, and I always just want to remain neutral. And I've actually realized that remaining neutral can be a tool that the enemy uses, even when you think you're just trying to be like peaceful is like the word I would use for it. But really it's operating out of fear that you don't actually want to speak boldly about your beliefs. And that's just like not what we're called to do. I mean, if you look at the Bible, the disciples were saying very bold things that got them killed. And so it's something I'm really trying to flex because that's hard for me. Like it's even hard sometimes. And, I am fully disagree with abortion and very against it, very pro-life. And sometimes it's hard for me to say that on social media.
Sure.
Because I have friends who don't believe that. And I'm like, I just would rather not engage. Sure. But like that in and of itself, that kind of like apathy towards it leaves room for the enemy to continue.
I agree. And I think that one of the things that I've learned, because I am fairly confrontational, I have a little people pleaser, but also enjoy a fight. So I have to...
That like sums you up so perfectly. A little bit of a people pleaser, but you enjoy a fight.
Yeah, that's kind of how I roll. So I have to remember to posture myself in love and know that I'm not trying to advocate for or, argue for something just to be right, because I like to be right as well. But when that's not the love of God, that's not the heart of God. So, whether it's LGBTQ, I mean, I don't think it's God's best for people. That's where I try to approach it. It's not that you're doing something wrong and it's a sin. It's like God has something better for you. Yeah. And you're going to miss out on what God has for you if you don't turn.
And so much of that is like, if you're not in relationship with people who are engaged in those circles, then you might lack the empathy needed to step into those conversations. Like the gender conversation or the sexuality conversation changed for me big time once I became friends with someone who is a lesbian. Like it just became different. And now I'm thinking about it like, wait, actually, I love this person and I want God's best for them.
Right.
And I'm literally not one time shoving down their throat my beliefs on sexuality. Right. I'm just loving them and telling them how Jesus changed my life and hoping that he does the same thing to them. So like that just changes things when you're actually in these circles of people, or like you talk to a woman who has had an abortion. Right. She's got enough shame and thoughts in her own head. She doesn't need you to add to those. What she needs is you to be told that she's still lovable, still worthy, and that she can be forgiven and set free from it, 100%. So it just changes things when you're actually like in the circle of people.
Yeah.
Wow, we really came out strong today, Walker.
Sorry, I knew it would happen.
I was thinking it was going to be something like, I don't like coffee, or like,
oh Lord,
football sucks, or I don't know, but.
I don't like coffee, so.
Oh, really? Ever?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't mind the taste of it, I just don't like to drink it.
Do you have a caffeine of choice?
I do like pre-workouts and stuff when I go to work out, and that's it.
Yeah.
Celsius.
You've never done coffee?
Powders. No, never really drank coffee except when I was in rehab.
I was about to say, well, you probably didn't need it when you were in your peak addict days, which we'll get into.
Other things that were more powerful.
Okay, well, let's get into it. Tell us your story of, you sit here today as a pastor, a strong believer, of course, a husband, a dad, and this just wasn't always your reality. And you have an incredible story of God rescuing you out of big time darkness. So tell us just kind of like how you grew up and what your life looked like, and then how you met the Lord.
So grew up, I was raised in Arkansas. My mom was a single mom. I think they got a divorce when I was 2 or so. And, my dad was kind of a wild man. And, my mom raised me in the church, but it was definitely more of a perfunctory kind of a thing you did, a box to check, if you will. I did see her read her Bible at night, so there was definitely truth there. And I developed a relationship with God for sure, but I never really knew how to connect with the church, just because my life was so different. I went through some sexual abuse and some other stuff as a kid that I think isolated me in some regards. And I don't ever talk about that much because it's embarrassing. It's also something that still, even though I'm older and, know now that I didn't have anything to do with it, there's shame with it. But I also say it because I know a lot of people, that's their story.
Yeah.
So a lot of people that either walk away from God or the church, etc., there's a story and there's wounds. And that's why I enter these things that you're talking about, these relationships, or step into messy ministry moments with empathy. It's because I just know there's a story there. It's not like someone just comes out of the gate, I hate the church and I hate you. So anyways, raised in the church, moved out here to Jacksonville when I was 13 or so, and just kind of was already starting to, I was stealing cigarettes out of the store and just kind of smoking leaves I found on the ground. Like, yeah, why not?
What?
I'm just trying stuff. And
did anything happen when you smoked leaves?
no, but I was smoking and,
Seemed fun.
Thought it was cool. So I was on my way, and then got out here and kind of went to a couple of different schools. I went to 13 different schools in my 12 years of schooling. So I was always the new guy, always trying to make friends.
Because you got expelled or you moved?
A couple of times it was my fault. A lot of moving.
Okay.
But I started saying, it's kind of a general story. Started smoking pot and dabbling in other things, and honestly just kind of stepped away from. I was still in youth group up until high school, but I was like that kid, is like, he's not coming here for the right reasons.
Everyone in student ministry listening right now is like, yeah, we know what kid.
Oh yeah, I got arrested on a youth group trip.
Oh, no.
We went to Six Flags. I stole some sunglasses and I got taken to the jail
In
underneath
middle
there. Yeah, like 8th grade. Yeah.
Wow.
And I got sent to the emergency room on another youth group trip for putting I broke a glow stick open and put it on my face with another kid who now goes to 1122, Randy Bruce. But
And you're like, yeah.
We did it, and it got in our eyes. We went emergency room. So,
oh my God.
But yeah, I was always just kind of mischievous, and but that pattern and that path leads somewhere. And in college, it led to I got a broken hand, got prescribed some pain pills. Oxycontins hit the scene, and I tried them, and that was the first thing I ever got addicted to.
Would you have been like peak oxy?
Yeah, like
epidemic?
2001.
Yeah. Oh wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Like, first hit the scene. Like,
wow.
Yeah, and I wasn't like reading the label. Obviously, they were lying, and they got sued, and it was very addictive. But I wasn't like worried about that.
Right.
So, but I'd never been addicted to anything, and I did them for like 3 weeks straight, and I quit, and I got sick, and I thought I had a cold. And like 2 days later, a buddy came over and he gave me like some pain pills, and it went away. And I remember going into the bathroom and kind of just like for the first time, like, oh, you're like a junkie, like you're like what you've seen on the movies, which you would think would make a rational person stop doing whatever that thing is. But an irrational person thinks, well, I can figure this out and I can kind of weasel out of it without the pain. And so you kind of try to wean yourself off, but then you go back to it. And the reality is, until you fill that void with something better, God, there's just going to be a void there that you're going to keep trying to fill up. And so the Oxycontins led to, basically from 23 to 30, addicted to opiates in some form or fashion, heroin. And then when when you've taken it to that extent, at least for me, really any escape from reality was good. Even if I didn't like the drug, like cocaine, I never even liked it, but I would do it. And then I'd like throw it away and, find myself like not even enjoying how I feel, but it was better than my reality because I had screwed my life up so bad. And so
what did the rest of your life look like at that time?
It's just in and out of jail,
Okay.
Just,
did you have a job at that point?
I had a few.
Okay.
I wasn't ever I never got employee of the month
Sure.
anywhere. And but I was couch surfing and selling drugs to kind of support my habit and make a little bit of money. And
Were you ever homeless?
no, I made it to my truck at one point.
Okay.
And I had a friend who would let me sleep at his house, actually right around here from the studio, and at night, but I'd have to leave during the day.
Oh, wow.
And that was kind of like my, I guess, rock bottom, if you will. I was like, all right, I need to get some help. And
Did you ever have any big scares in those 7 years?
I overdosed one
You
time.
did?
Yeah.
Like hospitalized and everything?
Yeah, like
oh, wow.
my roommates were probably going to let me die. They didn't really know opiates that well. They were alcoholics, so we all grouped together. And anyways, yeah, a guy came over that knew, and they took me to the hospital and Narcaned me and all that. And I remember waking up and just kind of knew. I saw everybody standing there, and I was like, oh, I did that, didn't I? So, I mean, that, and I mean, I probably I should be dead for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, from the amount of drugs that I did, and definitely shouldn't have my teeth, and, like that kind of thing.
You also have great teeth.
I mean,
wild. God really preserved you.
Yeah.
He knew if your actual calling was to pastor people. He knew you couldn't have
I need my
really
teeth.
jacked up teeth to be too distracting.
I mean, they're out there. I'm sure there's some good pastors.
Oh, yeah, of course. Or like no teeth or something. Yeah. Okay, sorry, keep going. So then what happened?
So then I ended up out here. I actually came to visit my mom, and right out here at this stoplight, on Atlantic Boulevard, I was going to my buddy's house, and he's like, follow me home. We'd had a couple drinks, and I was like, okay. But of course, at the red light, I wanted to race.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I sped off, not knowing there was a cop behind me. He followed me all the way down Atlantic. My buddy pulled up beside me when the lights went on and waved and said, we're going to Waffle House. We'll pick you up tomorrow. So I went to jail for DUI. So I stayed here. I was always trying to get sober. I never was like, I love being a drug addict.
Okay.
It's okay. I knew there was something different. So I was constantly battling this thing. And at the time I was on Suboxone. So I'd kind of been,
I don't know what that is.
it's a thing they give you that it suppresses opiates. So you can't really get high, but it also keeps you from getting sick. So it's kind of like it's like methadone, but not as addictive or powerful.
Okay.
So
to
I was
try and help you.
Yes, and it's a great one. If it's just, I think that a lot of people, doctors prescribe things forever that should be prescribed for a short period of time, and then you should change your lifestyle and other aspects to complement, whether it's all of them.
Yeah.
Depression. I've been on all that stuff, but so I went to jail, got on probation, ended up violating my probation, got taken back to jail with no bond, and at that point I had gotten re-addicted, so I was back on opiates, and I was smoking crack at the time, like just off the rails. And but I knew when I got arrested that time, I'd been begging God to take the addiction from me.
Oh, wow.
And I just kind of knew this was my chance. And so I remember the cops being like, I was like happy, and I knew I was about to go through withdrawals and go to jail and all that. But he's like, why are you happy? And I was like, well, this is my chance. Like, this is not the life I'm supposed to be living. God has something different for me, and I'm going to take this opportunity to change. And so I went to jail, got sober physically in jail, and they were trying to put me in a program. It's called the Matrix, and they have to sentence you for 12 months, 8 to 12 months. So I'd gone through all of the pre-trial stuff and talked to the lady, so they were going to give me 8 to 12 months. And I met a guy in there. We were doing a Bible study, and he told me about the Salvation Army. And it's a Christ-centered, the ARC program. It's Christ-centered men's rehab here in town. It's free, and honestly, deep down, like, they have pool tables and good food and video games. I was like, Lord, if you please get me out of here.
That sounds like, if I'm going anywhere, that sounds like the place I'd like to go.
Can I go to this one? And I promise I'll go. And so I went to court the next day, and they gave me time served, just like, go home. And being the ridiculously unscrupulous addict that I was, I reneged on my deal with God and said, well, now I'm physically sober. I don't really need to go. And within like a week or two, I was back on the drugs. And I was like, all right, I don't know how to stay sober.
Yeah.
Like, I need help. And so I went and did 6 months there. And while I was there, my little sister was in Pastor Joby and Gretchen's small group, and my mom was attending Beach United Methodist, and 1122 had just started. So I went once I was able to leave the facility, and heard the gospel for the first time. You know, I'd heard the God's good, you're bad, try harder message a whole lot. Whether that's what they were actually preaching, I know they were probably good churches, but the gospel was not the preeminent message. And when I heard that, you know, Romans 5:8, yet while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I was like, oh, I don't have to earn God's love. Like, he loves me, and as a response to his love, I am obedient. Because of all my abuse and neglect and not having a dad, like, I was like, if this is the God that they're presenting, you know, that I have to jump through all these hoops, then I'm just going to keep having a relationship with them as I know, which isn't good, because you need help. You need believers to help you. You need doctrine. You need to be able to understand who God is, and you need people around you. And so anyways, got involved at the church, started serving. Some people, you know, kind of called out some leadership stuff in me and gave me some opportunities to do that. Carrie Williams was one of them. And
was that crazy for you? Like, what did you think? Like, while it's happening, are you just beside yourself that all of a sudden this is your life now? Like, you're a sober church volunteer?
Yeah, I remember the first time they told me to pick up the offering out of the boxes.
Oh.
This might make me cry. And I remember picking it up, and I was like, man, they don't know who they got taking this offering up. And God was like, I know who I got taking this offering up.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. You know, if you want me to, if you say I can do this, then I'll do it. And so yeah, it's still wild sometimes. I mean, obviously it's 15 years, you know, almost now. But it is, I pinch myself sometimes because I shouldn't be married with two beautiful, healthy kids. And even the timing of my addiction. I mean, I have friends who, you know, they were addicts when they had kids, and that's you know, all the damage that I did. Like, my kids have no idea.
Yeah, they get to see the testimony of what God did in your life.
But they don't even know that I've done any of that yet.
Yeah. Well, sure, yeah. But at some
Pastor
point, I'm
Joby
sure
mentioned it in service the other day, and I knew they were watching online that day. And I was like, hey, babe, how was that? And she's like, well, I'm crying, but the kids were distracted. And I was like, okay, good. I was not ready to have that quite yet.
That's a cool story. Did the Salvation Army, were they sending groups of men to church at that point, or is that something you started later?
I started, yeah.
Okay, so for those, probably a lot of people don't know, but almost every Thursday night, if not every Thursday night,
Sunday morning.
Yep. Salvation Army sends a group of men from their program to be able to come to church, and they're always dressed to the nines, and I just love to see them. And you were with them the other day, and there was just a moment in the sermon where, and we were singing about that. It was crazy because we were singing the song "The Lord Will Provide," and I was watching this man that was with you, older, and I'm just thinking about, you know, what he's probably going through. I don't know his story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know him at all, and he's crying with his arms up, singing, I know the Lord will provide.
I remember that.
And it says blessings upon blessings. And a lot of people would sing that thinking like God's going to bless them. Their life's going to look amazing. And this man, who probably has nothing, is probably at rock bottom, is his hands in the air singing blessings upon blessings. I know the Lord will provide. And my heart was so encouraged that day. And just to see that, it's so cool.
Yeah. So, I started coming, and then I once I came on staff, I mean, that was a long journey, but yeah, I started serving. And then, you know, when we started talking about launching a church, I was just like, this is what I want to do with my life. So I told Pastor Joby, I'll clean the floors or sweep the floors, clean the toilets. That's how much I know about facilities work. I didn't even know which one I was supposed to do. And so they came back and said, hey, we got a job for you, sweeping the floors and cleaning the toilets.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. I mean, I think
Clifton, I was serious.
Clifton had just gotten hired, and some other people to do like cool things like student ministry. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's what I said. I'll do it. So
wow. So was that a moment? Like, was that a humbling moment as you look back?
Well, yeah. It was a great moment. I was actually fine with it. You know, it's kind of a joke, but there was obviously I have an ego there, deep down in there, like, this is. But no, it was great. It was all I wanted to do. I've been looking for church people that were
a little edgy,
like
who have a story. Yeah.
Said a cuss word here and there, and didn't pretend to be perfect in front of people and purposefully sin behind doors, but just kind of were authentic and searching for God. And anyways, so I was like, yeah, I want to be a part of this. And so that's, I got hired I was on a mission trip in Jamaica, and Brad Bowen was there, He was the facilities director at the time. So he and Joby and I actually got married on that mission trip. I don't think people are supposed to know that. Yeah. But
like
it's the
planned?
first and last. It was supposed to be nothing. I thought it was just going to be like I was in Joby's disciple group and I was like, hey, man, we're planning a wedding and we don't really have a lot of money. So we'd rather just get it done and use the money for a house. Can you just kind of do the thing on the beach? And so I wasn't going to tell anybody on the trip and ended up telling a stranger on the plane. And Kelly Kobe, one of our friends who we didn't even know at the time, overheard. And so her and her sister, there were so many couples that we're still now really dear friends with, overheard. And so we had like a free day the last day and we went to Dunn's River Falls or something. It was kind of a cushy mission trip. And while we were there, they planned like this huge, I'm talking, Joby went and got a cake, had a little black bride and groom on the top. And
oh my gosh, that's incredible.
We had like lamb and all kind of stuff. And it's like right when iPods were happening. So we had like acoustic hits during dinner and we wobbled afterwards.
Of course. Oh, you had a full wedding.
And then Pastor Wayne, they took pictures. There was like a makeup girl there. Pastor Wayne drove us to Montego Bay at the end and we stayed for like 4 more days. So got back and we had the house that we had bought while we were in Jamaica at Kinko's where guys tried to sell me ecstasy. Okay. And I said, no, I'm on a mission trip. And he was like, oh, I got Bibles too, man. I was like, this guy is a businessman. So anyways, ended up at the church and that's when I started picking up the guys once I started working there. And I would pick them up on Sundays. We used to have an old VW bus that somebody had donated. And so it's just been a thing. I mean, I see the life change when they get to come and hear the gospel and be a part of that. Sorry.
You've always been the guy who, like we used to joke, actually it then became a rule on staff, but you were always the guy people called when there was just like someone with a wild story, whether it was like someone coming in high, a homeless person, a demon possession, like it didn't matter. If someone was coming in who was like slightly, I'm just going to use the word wild. I don't know how else. It was like, well, we'll just call Walker. Like you were just the guy. And you are someone who just steps right into messy situations and you don't see anybody as too far gone. And did that come from just like your own story or like where did that heart for the broken of the broken come from?
I do think that somehow like I've cared about people, I've been empathetic my whole life, but obviously walking through what I've walked through and God bringing me out of it definitely gives me a perspective to know that, like I said earlier, I mean, these people just have things that have happened to them most of the time. Now, that doesn't excuse our current decisions, even all my stuff. It's not an excuse. I still made terrible decisions and walked away from God, and I'm not proud of my testimony. I want to make that very clear because people all say, well, you have a great testimony. No, actually, if you were raised in church and never left and you're a good Christian, quote unquote, then I envy that one. And that's the one I want for my kids for sure, but I think honestly, at the beginning, it was just nobody else was doing it. It's like, all right, well, I'll talk to this guy. Or girl or whatever was going on. And then, I was coming to the Bible and to church from just kind of such a raw place that if I read it in there, I was like, I want to do that. And ended up having went on a mission trip to Brazil with some kind of charismatic people and kind of started praying in the spirit and stuff like that. And so the demon thing, I was just like, all right, well, it says we can cast them out. Give that a shot. I've had some failures.
But
I've had some successes.
It literally became a rule. I remember even reading it on like the care guidelines for the front desk. It was like, please do not call Walker Day. And then there was another woman too, April Terrell, we'd always call her too. And it literally said like, you can do, it was like trying to encourage the person, like you can do it. Walker is not the only one who can, but cause you just had become that. Like, it was like a hard person and well, Walker can meet him. Like, I don't know. You really do have the spiritual gift of just empathy and meeting people right where they are and pastoring to their heart deep in that brokenness, but not excusing the sin. And I think that's really tricky because it's really easy to see people right where they are, meet them there, love them there, And it's easy to do on the opposite end of the spectrum, to judge them, not want to touch them with a 10-foot pole, not even get near the gross, and just speak truth. Oh, that's not who we are, how we should live.
Right.
Coming in the middle is really an art and a gift of being able to see and love people where they are and know God, like you've been saying this whole time, that that's not God's best for them,
Right.
and trying to walk them towards what is God's best for them.
Right.
Will you tell us about the homeless mission trip? Because I feel like this sums you up as a person just in a great way.
So that mission trip that I mentioned earlier, we were floating down, we did a whole bunch of stuff and it was awesome. But like most American Christians, I kind of thought I was going there to do God's work and I was going to save these people, not
Sure.
all the way, but like that's what I was kind of the mindset. And I remember we were journaling and I'm going down the Amazon. We were like deep in the Amazon, going to these different remote villages. And I just felt this conviction from the Lord. And I felt like Holy Spirit said, you're 3,000 miles away, speaking through 3 interpreters, and you're $3,000 in the hole. What are you doing in the place that I've put you? What are you doing at home? And obviously I was working at the church and doing some stuff, but I was like, obviously he wanted me to do something more. So I got home and I was praying about it, and like 3 weeks later, I felt like the Lord woke me up in the middle of the night and just said, "You need to go be homeless for 3 weeks." And
you were married at this point?
Yeah, so I
What
told
did
my
Rachel
wife.
say?
She's like, "Well, I feel like I'm hearing the Lord maybe say a week," and I was like, "Okay."
Wait, originally it was how long?
3 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, maybe a week, I think God's saying. And I was like, okay. So I told Pastor Joby, just for accountability, I was like, I think the Lord's telling me to do this at my group. I told them, and a couple of guys said, we want to come with you. So Corey Whidden, who runs Hope's Closet, her husband, he had come to Brazil with us. So he came, and then Scott Watley, used to be our videographer, came, and we basically, we had bus passes, and I think Jared, remember Jared Fields?
Yeah.
He had like a yoga mat like rolled up on his backpack, and Scott had a camera, and we left out of, right near the church, and we had people had found out, we had like a young adults kind of unofficial group at the time, and they wanted to partner with us. And again, to your point earlier, like I don't ever want to enable people, because I was enabled almost to death, and it's mind-boggling what can be enabling to someone who's running from God, and maybe tell a little story about that. But anyways, we went downtown, and they brought socks and sandwiches, and really that was the first time that my eyes were a little bit open to, like, these people they have been victimized, most of them at some point, but they're not necessarily helpless victims in their current circumstances. They were like 4 churches that pulled up to this park where all these homeless people were. They had like tunes going, like drinking beers, and they'd like get the clothes from the church people, and then they'd
they're calling them over.
They were trading like clothes for sandwiches and just having a good time. Not one got on any of the buses to go to the churches. And that was kind of my first, like, oh, okay. Like, because you hear people say, well, maybe that people want to be homeless. You're like, no way, nobody would want to be homeless. Well, there are a lot of people who would just rather not have any responsibility. So anyways, we slept behind buildings and ate at shelters. We didn't take any money. We had some cool experiences, and were able to meet some homeless people that, we were able to help get into different either shelters or rehabs. And really it kind of laid the foundation for me to then transition from facilities into care. And help me write some of the care team curriculum, and help staff and other people know how to, like you said, love people and meet them where they are, but also not, get sucked into the sob story and, cosign whatever.
Yeah, let's talk about the enabling. Like, what does it look like to enable someone who's running from God, like you were saying? Because people might not know what feels like helping.
Sure.
I mean, there's a whole book called When Helping Hurts.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you feel like you're helping, sometimes it can hurt.
Right. Well, the time that it really hit me, so homeless people would come to the church all the time. We had Hope's Closet, so we had our thrift store, and I was like, well, we got free stuff people are giving us. We can give it to them if they need it. And this one guy in particular who I knew had left his family and was, riding his bike around drinking and just said, I just need to get a job and then I can get back. And so I talked to him a lot, and I'd gotten him like a backpack and some shoes at some point, and he came back and he said, all my stuff got rained on. Can you get me another backpack? And I just, for the first time, was like, it's hard to say no to people that are in need. You feel bad. You feel like, who am I? I'm going home to sleep in my bed, and this guy just needs a backpack, and we got some free ones. Like, surely I can help him. But God just told me not to, and he was kind of ticked off. And I remember on the way home, I was just kind of talking to God about it and praying, and I felt like the Lord, he said, I was like, why can't I just give him some stuff, And he's like, well, he said, what do you call it when someone runs from the law? And I was like, oh, that's a fugitive. And he's like, well, what do you call it when someone helps, someone that's a fugitive? And I was like, oh, that's aiding and abetting a fugitive. And he's like, why are you aiding and abetting people who are running from me? Whoa. Yeah. And so I went back the next day and I was like, no, you can't have a backpack. Wow. I will give you a ride to a place that you can get some help, So my new policy after that was like, I really feel like there are instances where Holy Spirit can, inspire me to do something a little different. But my blanket policy is like, I will help you as long as you are helping yourself, and I get to determine what that is. So whether that's a child who's addicted, or whether that's a brother or friend or a parent, like, they're going to get mad and say, well, I need this. This is what's going to help me. They typically have their solution ready, but you can, no, I don't think that's helping you. Give me some cigarettes. It's just cigarettes. It's not bad. Well, I don't think that's helping you. So I'm not going to get you cigarettes.
Didn't you get carjacked once by taking someone somewhere?
Yeah, I did.
And then that set the standard at our church. We weren't allowed to drive people one-on-one somewhere.
Well, I mean, that, and there was a pastor who was killed down in St. Augustine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's heartbreaking.
So, yeah, you just never know. So we do have some hard policies.
Because of you.
Yeah, part of it.
And we're not a policy place. That's also what's funny.
Just for safety purposes.
Just what Walker has done.
Don't get yourself carjacked on our watch.
What do you feel like? You talked about being raised, not having a dad, and your definition of God was one thing that you believed for a long time, and then when you came to church, it changed. What did you feel like you learned about God that surprised you once you really started reading the Word, praying, communing with other believers?
Well, I think the biggest thing was that the church is the bride of Christ. And especially once I got married, I had a bride, and, she's not perfect, but if somebody talked crap about her, the old Walker might come out. So, my own hang-ups with the church just kind of shifted from like, that's a bad church, or the church is bad, to it's made up of broken people. It is the bride of Christ. He is perfecting her, and I'm a part of that, and I need to be empathetic and loving towards those church people and churches that I may feel like are not kind of living up to God's standard, if you will, of caring or preaching the gospel, or whatever the thing is. So I think that was a big one. Just I know that the church has warts and there's lots of issues, and I also don't disparage the church because, it's like...
And that's evidenced as you've been on staff for 13 years. I don't want Jesus
kicking my butt.
Yeah. You've been on staff for 13 years, so you've seen a lot of people, you've seen a lot of seasons, and you choose to keep showing up. And it's probably because of what you just said, because you know that it's broken people that make up the church, but that ultimately God uses the broken people. Which that is a great segue into when you transitioned from cleaning toilets to care director, because I want to get into that when you were called to be a pastor.
Sure.
And you started leading all of our care teams. So it's cool because I feel like you were just like being you, and this is so applicable to anybody. It's like, do what God has put right in front of you. Right. Have the one conversation with the homeless person and love them really well, whether that's in truth or grace. Yeah. And you keep doing that, and then let God elevate you to what that means. And then, because you ended up having you built the care ministry at our church, which is massive now. And so tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I had done Stephen ministry training. It's similar-ish at Beach. And so I had the foundation of kind of just some tools that helped me utilize my story and my testimony to kind of and to help people. And so that it honestly was just kind of a seamless transition for me. I don't feel like I was doing much different as the facilities director. Obviously, there were some tasks that were different, but I don't feel like I had to shift my mindset or daily intentions. I was just looking for people to help, and then I was able to, at that point, put something together that could help other people do that.
Yeah.
And
Which, pause, because someone needs to hear that, because that is so important for it. It doesn't matter if you're in vocational ministry or wherever you're at. Like, it is not the job description that defines the call on your life.
Right.
It is the call in your life that God has given us, which is go and make disciples of all nations. And
100%.
so you saying that nothing changed. I mean, that's kind of crazy. Like, cleaning toilets to leading a whole care ministry, you're saying nothing changed other than a couple tasks. And like, that is the goal of truly anybody in vocational ministry, but really anywhere, that it's not about the job. It's about your heart doing whatever the assignment is in front of you.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
so good.
just wake up and do what God tells you,
Come on.
and do the task if you have a job, and that's what I was trying to say to
Yeah.
our staff when Britt asked me that question
Yeah.
the other day. It's just, we know what our calling is. It's to be sons and daughters. And if you're in tune with God and in touch with Him and you're doing that, then the places or the opportunities to do that will
No doubt.
come along.
So when were you called to be a pastor?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean,
Slow burn?
I didn't call. I did. It wasn't like God told me. Ryan Stone told me one day, "Hey."
He's always telling people
Yeah.
what they're called to.
Yeah,
he told me what I was
exactly.
called to too.
Yeah. So,
Look at us now.
Yeah. Podcasting.
He might be onto
and
something.
announcing. Yeah. And he invited me into a residency, and I think there were 7 of us, and we went through 12 or 18 months of studying, and that's about when Pastor Britt showed up, and he looked at the process and was like, "No, these guys aren't pastors," so none of us got ordained. And then we started the new pastoral ordination track, and that's when I got invited into that one, and
So you kind of did double.
I did double duty. I needed it probably.
Yeah, probably.
And so yeah, it was. I still. It's a weird thing. I mean, like you said, I'm not only a church person. I'm a
You're
pastor.
a pastor.
So when I tell people, at the gym or wherever, jujitsu or whatever I'm doing, they're like, I usually don't very soon, because then they
have
like
a
apologize
preconceived
for cussing in
notion.
front of me and
Oh,
stuff.
right,
And I'm like,
right. That just happened to me. We went to Mellow Mushroom last Thursday night for a girl on staff's birthday after Thursday night service. And we walked in, and the hostess or the host guy, whatever, he's like looking at somebody. He's like, "Oh shit!" And then he looks at me and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Why are you sorry?" And he's like, "Oh, you're the girl that does the announcements at 11:22." I'm like, "No, seriously, it's
Oh, yeah.
okay." Like
Yeah.
and then you could tell like the whole night he was trying. And I'm like, "No, seriously,
I know.
it's fine."
yeah. So I try not to tell people right out of the gate, and then like
Yeah.
them to be a little surprised when they, "Oh, you're a pastor?"
Little surprise. You like
Yeah.
to surprise them.
Yeah, a little surprise pastor.
Yeah.
Ha! I'm in your circle. Too late.
Yeah, too late. You already loved me.
Yeah, you love me. So, but it's I don't know what that is. I mean, the calling. I don't
Yeah.
really know how to define it. I just know that God's calling me closer to Him, and I try to do whatever He tells me to do. And if there are people who have spiritual authority in my life that I trust, that see something or present an opportunity, I try to pray about it and do it.
Yeah, and I love your answer to that, because there's not a 10-step process of reaching your ultimate whatever it is that God's called you to do all the time. And one thing that inspires me about you always is I really do feel like you are genuinely just trying to do whatever God's telling you to do right now. And sometimes you don't even know.
Even
and
this. I was
what'd you
like,
say?
even this.
Yeah.
I was like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
really?
Oh, I know.
You
Well,
want
we
me
should
to
tell people-
talk on a recorded thing?
Yeah, I texted Walker asking him to be on the podcast, and then you ghosted me for 2 full days until I saw you at church. I'm like, excuse me, like, are you gonna respond to me ever? And you had said like, this blows my mind. You said you started getting like insecure about it.
Well, I mean, definitely. I mean, I have tons of insecurities.
Which that's crazy to me because you're also like one of the most faith-filled, bold people, I love it because it speaks to people who are listening right now. And it's like you can be both at the same time. And honestly, everybody probably is both at the same time always. And so how do you fight those whispers? Like those whispers that come back and like, are you seriously a pastor? Like, do you know what you've done?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, you're really going to get on a microphone and talk about your story when like you still haven't healed from your sexual abuse when you were a kid? Like, how do you fight those whispers?
I just show up. I mean, that's like, I think one of your questions was, what would you tell a believer? And something that, I don't even, how do you say it?
What's one thing you would tell every believer that they should do in their walk with Jesus?
Just keep showing up. I remember early on, like I had a few slips and, obviously was not completely healed. I still had anger issues and lust issues. I mean, the drugs were just masking a bunch of that. So, but the enemy would start whispering and say, well, you can't go back. And, I was just like, I was lead usher at 720.
Lead usher.
Yeah. So I was just passing out bulletins, but there was still this conviction of like, or condemnation saying, you can't do that. Look at you, and, I just kind of said, screw you, devil. I'm just going to go.
Screw you, devil.
Screw you, devil. And so I think
you can take the boy out of Arkansas, but you can't take the Arkansas out of the boy.
So just keep showing up. I mean, that's show up at the altar, show up and serve, show up and, and your quiet time, just keep doing it. There's dry seasons. There's moments where there's doubt. There's, at least for me, there's that, obviously some, what is it? The imposter syndrome and you know what I mean? Like if they really knew kind of deal. And, I just show up. I'm like, all right, God, if you're telling me to do this and like, I'm still seeing you move through what I'm doing, then I'll just keep doing it. And then if he wants to shut it off or, if this is my last day on staff because I say something crazy before this thing ends, then I'll just keep doing what I'm doing.
No, we're about to shut it down. You haven't said anything fireable.
Nice yet.
And you haven't cussed.
I know.
I cussed more than you on this episode. I mean, I was telling stories, so
maybe
it doesn't
you should
count.
get fired for that.
Okay, well, let's not put that in anybody's head. Well, I can't thank you enough, and it's an honor, honestly, to watch God move in and through your life, and I'm excited for what's to come, and watching you pastor and care for people has been fundamental, probably more than, I actually know it's more than you even know, but me just seeing you care for people and pastor people has changed my ministry and influenced my walk. And I know that people listening, it's going to do the same. So thanks.
Want me to cuss one time before we go?
No.
I got a story. It's pretty good.
Okay, fine. One last story.
So I remember somebody came up to me at a care team service, and it was this little old, just the most buttoned up, sweet looking old man. And, he came up and he had been on the care team for like 6 months or a year. And he goes, Walker, I remember when Margaret and I got here and, there was one time and you were teaching and we just knew this is our church. And I was like, oh, what profound theological, deep thing did I say? And he's like, you were talking about, your childhood. And at some point you said, no disrespect, but I just had a shitty dad. And he's like, and that's when we knew this was our place. And I was like, this dude had a sweater vest on and like,
oh my gosh,
like,
that's incredible.
Because I'm always nervous. I am pretty authentic and raw. And I wrestle with, the Lord, and I want to honor him with my words and
you've
mouth.
Come a long way.
Yeah. But there's also this aspect of like, sometimes people just need to know that you're a real person.
Yeah, so true.
You're not making up fake Christian cuss words just when you're in front of people, but when you're at home,
no one needs that.
Actually saying them. So there.
All right.
I said a cuss word.
Okay, yeah, there we go. All right, thank you, Walker.
All right, thank you, Allie.
Thanks for listening. We'd love for you to join us in The Neighborhood, our Patreon community. It's a space for the good, the hard, and the hilarious. A place where real life happens. It's $5 a month or any additional amount you choose. You'll get a podcast episode once a week from Caitlin and I, plus additional videos, early access to events and merch, and more fun things we'll do along the way. So come join us by going to patreon.com/neighborspodcast and sign up. We'll see you in the neighborhood. And if you enjoy Neighbors, we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review anywhere you listen to the podcast, or subscribe and give this video a thumbs up on YouTube. Sharing is the best way to help our conversations make it into more corners of life. To grab your favorite Neighbors merch or resources, you can head to our website, theneighborspodcast.com. Neighbors is produced by Logger Creative, audio by Taylor Minning, and music by Austin and Lindsay Adamak. See you next time.